So again, hi everyone, I am Iris May. So today I'm going to talk about few things about globalization. So according to few projects and assignments we've done, we have to define what globalization is. So globalization, the best scholarly description of globalization is provided by Manfred Steger, who described the process as the expansion and intensification of social relations and consciousness across the world time and across the world space. So most accounts view globalization as primarily an economic process. Again, globalization is a broad term to anyone who do not know anything about what is happening in his or her country. So whenever a newspaper reports that nationalists are resisting globalization, it usually refers to the integration of the national markets to a wider global market signified by the increased free trade. Governments that decide to welcome the foreign investments on the belief that our government is now open to any country who are going to invest in our country. So they do believe that other countries provide jobs and capital for the country, offer public lands as a factory or industrial site. So nowadays we do now a lot of offers, especially to Davao City, because we are now having the progress for the build program. So our government offer a lot to any other country. So in the process, poor living people in these lands, also called urban poor communities, we all know that we undergo with this term manco, because when you are a member of the urban poor community, you are being evicted by the government on the land. So as ironic as it seems, these people forcibly removed from their slums are also the labor force sold to by foreign companies. They had to be kicked out of their homes and then told that they could take an hour or two of bus travel from their relocated communities back to the old home or minimum wage work. We do encounter different forms of globalization. There are varieties of ways it is deemed useful to ask simple questions like, we do ask this man out of nowhere, if is globalization good or bad? Is it really beneficial or detrimental? The discussion begins for a while. So let's proceed with what is globalization. So globalization is the expansion refers to both the creation of new social networks and the multiplication of existing connections that cut across traditional political, economic, cultural, and geographical boundaries. These various connections occur at different levels. So there are types of globalization. Let us now proceed with the first one, political globalization. It refers to the diplomatic negotiations between nation states. It includes the standardization of global rules and trade, around trade, criminality, and the rule of law. So next one is the economic globalization. It refers to the ways corporations do business as multinational organizations nowadays. This can help developing nations increase overall employment, but can be considered exploitation of nations with poor working conditions. It also takes good paying jobs away from developed nations. So I guess most common type of this job is the business process outsourcing. Again, call center agents in our city is now huge. We have plenty of companies now here in Davao City. So next would be technological globalization. It refers to the spread of technology around the world. Technological globalization is closely connected to the anthropological scapes of globalization theory by Arjun Apparadai. So later I will talk about his views about globalization. So next would be social globalization. Social globalization refers to the integration of our societies, not to be confused with the cultural globalization. Sociological globalization refers to the idea that we now live in a shared society. I guess we do Filipinos are good at adapting mango, different cultures. Next would be financial globalization. It refers to the ease at which money can be spread around the world. But many nations also face backlash because of the sense that overseas companies buy out too much of their businesses, real estate and farming land, which could be threat to the nation's sovereignty. I guess because of the pandemic, we do now encounter huge problem about the financial globalization, especially Philippines, India, and a lot of countries are now struggling because of the pandemic. Next would be cultural globalization. So it refers to the spread and mixing of cultures around the world. Arjuna Pradai talks about the possible effect of homogenization. So, homogenization of culture, where dominant nations like the United States spread their cultures through television and movies, which leads to the dilution and loss of local indigenous cultures. I guess ecological globalization, it has a brief explanation. Ecological globalization refers to the idea that the world needs to be considered one interconnected system. Geographical globalization, it refers to the idea that the world is no longer seen as groups of distinct nations as much as it once was. We now work in multinational blocks to make decisions, and nations work together to solve problems, because we now have the United Nations. So let's now proceed with the advantages of globalization. So globalization provides easier access to capitals and commodities, better availability of products and services, cheaper prices for products and services as they have more optimized supplies. Producers and retailers can sell diversity, which may contribute to the economic growth. It is the export and import of materials in any country. So gives us better understanding of foreign values and characteristics. It offers less stereotyping and misconceptions about other countries, especially to its people, to its society, its own community. So it gives instant access to information from anywhere in the world. So it gives access to international aid and support. It also contributes world peace as it produces the risk of invasion, has limitation and nationalism. So smaller countries may work together with the developed countries, such as the connections between the China and the Philippines, US and the Philippines. So we do gain more knowledge internationally. The government may learn from each other. Again, learning is a continuous process. Other countries may learn from Filipinos, and we do learn too from them. So, aside from its advantages, let us now proceed to its disadvantages. So there are drawbacks of globalization. So gives intense competition from any countries around the world. It widens the gap between the wealthy and the poor countries in the world. The business owners and well-known companies are the ones who earn in globalization. Small business and companies may be at risk as they can no longer compete with those multinationals. Workers in developed countries are displaced as companies employ more workers, paid more lower wages in developing countries. So it gives power to the corporation and gives less power to the workers. Unwanted external influences that are difficult to control may risk the cultural imperialism. And last, I guess, would be there is a dominance of foreign industries. For anthropologist Arjuna Puradai, different kinds of globalization occur in multiple interesting dimensions of integration that he calls scapes. An ethnoscape, for example, refers to the global movement of people, while mediascape is about the flow of culture. Another is called technoscape, refers to the circulation of mechanical goods and software. A financescape denotes the global circulation of money, and idioscape is the realm where political ideas move around. So, although they intersect, these various scapes have different logics. They are thus distinct windows into the broader phenomenon of globalization. So, Paradise argument is simple. There are multiple globalizations. Hence, even if one does not agree that globalization can be divided into 5 scapes, it is hard to deny a Paradise central thrust of viewing globalization through various lenses. So the 8 types of globalization are not as distinct as you think. One type of globalization may have similar characteristics of another, and they may influence one another. So every type of globalization is interconnected with one another. Filipinos really have small ounce of choice but to accept this global state as a country and as a nation. We have to face the reality that globalization impact does not benefit most of us. It does not benefit most of the Filipinos. So let's now proceed with the contemporary world. So the contemporary world, back then the world seemingly encompassed only our communication and our country. Today it is no longer the case. We cannot ignore the reality when reality hits us. Our country's global links continue to expand, manifests Filipinos who risk to dwell and leave the country to earn way better. Filipinos are seen in any country. Our communication with the world has already remarkably increased through business like call centers. Contemporary world. So, the contemporary world helps us gain more knowledge about what is happening in the real world, gives us events that are timely. It helps us deal with real life situations as a Filipino. So, global trends throughout the decades have changed dynamically. So, globalization enabled countries to exchange goods, ideas, culture, and even make migration possible. So, our country have taken a participative role in different events and organization across the globe. So with the increasing interdependence among countries, we have become a nation that is open for everyone and to anyone. So in my point of view, one cannot take part in any discussion without knowledge. Therefore, we must acknowledge the power of just being well informed with what is happening in our own nation, in our surrounding. Of the contemporary world is not just to become an additional, to have an additional load in our subject, but I guess it is required for us to sort some and to give us opportunity to become a contributing citizen that is able to share ideas and comments on the unlawful system present on our society. So in our today's era, we just don't need someone that is educated. We need people that are well-rounded individuals that has the urge to face the reality of our current situation. Like what is happening right now, we have to deal with the pandemic. So we must not deprive ourselves with basic knowledge about coronavirus. We have to deal with what is happening not just with our country but around the world. So we have to, still Filipinos are resilient. So we have to stand as a nation. That would be all for today. So this is Iris May Alvarado saying, we have learning is a process. Therefore, we must trust the process.